All right, long overdue particle tutorial for those who are still using the old version and are terrified by this new version. Um, I won't be going too in depth into the original particular features like fields and size, rotation, opacity, all that stuff. All of those things have been around since the old particular, and I'm not gonna bother because there's tutorials for that already. I will cover the new features that have been added to particular. So if you do not know how to use particular, I don't recommend watching this video. But if you are upgrading to the new version, I do recommend this video. All right, so basically, going through everything, start with the linked null. This is basically just a, let me go out of here. If you go to emitter, you have a new button that just creates a null. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You just link the part position to a null. Nothing crazy, nothing fantastic. It's just a quality of life button, I guess. Coming back in here, we have from emitter speed, which allows you to emit more based on the speed that it's moving. I don't think you can preview it in the view in the designer here, so let's just go out here and do like a keyframe to over here so you can see what I mean. Yeah. So it's emits based on the speed that it's moving. So it's very useful if you want to do certain types of streak effects where you don't want it just spewing particles all over the place all the time, only when it's in fast motion. Now, they added form within particular, which it behaves exactly the same as form. But you do have to do box and grid if you want to get form behavior. So it's just a few extra clicks, but after that point, everything else is exactly the same as form. Classic form doesn't move. Dynamic form allows you to do things like the environment. So you can have fluid simulations and things like that. Yeah, simulations also apply here. Now, that covers the new emitter stuff. Let's go back to default. Motion, nothing new that I know of in the motion category. Particle type, we have pretty cool feature in particle type actually. It's this blend mode. In the new blend modes, we have add over life and screen over life. So if you know how add works, it's basically just, let me create an example here. Okay, so you see how when I switch it to normal, let me clump them to more. Okay, so when I switch it to normal, it's just all the same color, like it's stacked on top of each other. You can't really tell where the particles are, but when you do add, you get this really, I think red. Yeah, there we go. Don't do a fully saturated color because you won't get the effect showing. You need a little bit of like desaturation for it to show clearly. And there, you see how there's white and then dim and then regular, and then with screen, it's a better gradient. It's less harsh on how they're stacked on top of each other. It blends a little nicer. But if you don't want this really bright spot in the center where all your particles are clumped up, you can do a normal add over life or normal screen over life, which basically links this to a slider that goes from normal to add. So if we pull this down, you can see that the middle of the particles, the new particles, are darkening until we can get like a more balanced look if we want. So you can do like pull this up do screen over life. Or let me reset that. These particles aren't too dense, so it's not terrible looking, but like, see how it's bright clipping there? If we want to fix that, just pull this down slightly. And then you won't get the super bright spots. It's useful for certain effects where, let's say you have like a streak that moves like this. Now the end of it won't be pure white if you don't want that. I've used this many times. I really like the screen over life. Now here, nothing has changed really. Opacity, nothing has changed. Color, all the same. We have a new temperature feature, and that is related to the fire simulation in the simulation tab, and I'll get to that one in a bit. Environment tab. This is just, I think the air turbulence is new in this version. It's basically just a new form of the turbulent field here, except instead of pushing the particles around based on a texture, that texture is adding velocity to the particles in a certain direction. So you get a more realistic fluid motion out of it rather than just the particles getting shoved around like in the old version. How they're keeping their same direction, but they're kind of just getting pushed in a direction on top of their original motion, while this version actually adds speed and directions. So you get a real fluid flow out of it. Now, there's another feature, Move with Wind, that just basically moves the texture. So let's say we got a wind going upward here. If I increase the position and reduce the Move with Wind, it will should like shoot down, yeah. But if we make it move with wind fully, it tries to keep the flow of the texture, I guess, the noise texture that's happening to be following the wind. It's useful for when you have particles moving in a direction. It keeps it from flying all over the place sometimes. All right, let's get to simulation tab, because this is interesting. So bounce, I recommend messing around with this setting, or all of the simulation settings. Really just mess around with them on your own, because there's a lot you can do with them, and they're very powerful. So bounce is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to create a surface for these particles to bounce off of. And the layers are based on your actual 3D layers. So if you have a 3D layer in your comp, you can select it here and the particles will bounce off of it. Next, meander. It's kind of just it's similar to turbulence, where it just makes the particles walk around, I guess. Is oversimplification. Like, it just makes them wander around in any random direction. They'll just move. It's based on noise, but it's a little bit different than how turbulence works. Now, flocking is cool. It's basically it basically pulls particles together, or pulls them apart, or makes them follow something. So let me move the target for visualization. So they're attracted to each other, which means they're pulling into the center point, but then they're separating from each other. So if I increase the separate, they're going to launch away from each other when they get close. If I set this really high, they're going to go flying. Yeah. But if I set this to 0, they are just going to like clump really tight. And then align has to do with the rotation. So if I used a different particle type that had an image, I guess, you'd be able to see which direction they're rotating. Align just controls how much they face where they're looking, I guess. And then attract, exactly what it sounds like. It pulls them in. to each other or the origin. Now, target attraction, basically the target position is somewhere, and then target attraction basically means, are they going toward or away from that target? So they're trying to run away from the target versus trying to attack the target. Speed, maximum speed is the maximum speed they can move. That's self-explanatory. Range of view is how far away they can see something. So I move this target 400 away and then set the range of view to like 15. They're not going to see it anymore. If I slowly increase this, you'll see that some of the particles closer to it start seeing the target. If I increase it, more of them will start seeing the target and getting pulled toward it. You can see how the attraction is clumping them to their nearest groups as well. It's interesting. And then the range of view fall off is based on their field of view. So it's how much around wherever the particle is facing that they'll see it. So if you set it really narrow, some of them might not see something because it's behind them, maybe. But then if you increase it, they can see where they're supposed to go. And predator and prey is related to the attracting and separating and aligning features, where if they're set to predator, they're going to chase, and then set their prey, they're going to run away. It's related to multiple layers. So if I set this to predator, then yeah, so it can kill prey, kill both, freeze prey, or convert prey to predator. And then the team, you can assign them to what team you want. And this applies to the layer. So if I create another layer, I can set another one to prey and team B, and everything on team A will be attacking team B. You definitely have to mess around with that one. Sounds confusing, but when you try it out, it becomes a lot more intuitive. Now, fluid dynamics. Let me turn on the visual. All right, so force. The force is the shape of the flow, I guess. Buoyancy and swirl only is just the buoyancy control, which is how much it floats or how much it sinks. Little buggy. This simulation, the fluid dynamics, is a little bit buggy. And then if we do a random swirl, that is, yeah, I'm having issues with this. But it just it gives you a random swirling motion. Yeah, there you go. You can kind of see it, where they move in random directions, just like the air turbulence, but it takes into but in the fluid dynamics, it's taken into account that these particles are inside of a block of water, basically. So they're moving more as one. So like, let's say there's a random swirl over here. All of that water is getting pushed around, and it's going to interact with everything around it. So you get a lot more fluid-like motion out of this than you will out of turbulence, because turbulence is just a bunch of noise, while this one, it's really simulating water motion a lot more accurately, I guess. Simply put. Next, these are self-explanatory. The scale, seed, region size. It's just where is this force getting applied. And then the ring, it's basically just a ring where everything is curling around it, is curling through it. You can see the arrow direction here and here. And then tube, everything is swirling around the center axis. And buoyancy and swirl also apply to these. These are pretty cool effects. Definitely also mess around with this a lot to figure out what works and what doesn't. Another thing I forgot to mention, the combustion feature is this is the fire / smoke simulator within the simulation tab. This just allows you to do fire, basically. If we set this to point, or we do a let's do sphere and make this like 100. Yeah, you can kind of see what's happening here. It's basically just a fake fire simulator. It's kind of cool, but I have not found a use for it. But maybe one of you will. Moving on, motion effects haven't changed. Fields have not changed that I know of. Move with wind and all that. Basically just your generic turbulence, field, displacement, size, whatever. Same with the motion effects. The difference is, though, if you do not know, that wind is being applied as it's an acceleration. So it increases over time. So let's say, like, if I set this to increase upward, it slowly turns around and goes up, while this drift is a constant, like a constant motion. So it doesn't have to accelerate off spawn. It's always moving at that. It's always going to be moving at -90, even right when it spawns. Versus here, it starts at 0 when it spawns and then slowly increases to your value that you set. Or not increases. This value gets added to its speed over time, while this speed is applied constant over time. That's one thing to keep in mind. All of these, gravity as well, it's over time, while these are all a constant. And next, the kaleidoscope. It's all the same exact stuff. Layer maps have been added because of the addition of form. I think they only apply to forms. They do not apply when you're using particles. But it's basically the same feature as the form layer maps. And shadowlets, just the shading. I think it's exactly the same. I think the lighting allows you to use your After Effects lights. That might be a new feature in this version. I'm not sure. I've never used it. All right. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering, where are the aux particles, right? People have opened up the new version and they're like freaking out. Where's the trails? Really cool feature they moved it. It's now emit from parent. And once we do that, create a system. And now the way this works, what particular is functions now, is it's a layer-based system. So everything from the top cascades down. So let's say color, right? I delete the color in the second layer and change the first layer's color. It applies to the bottom layer. If I add the color back, though, if I add it back, now color only applies to this top one, and this color is affecting this one. So if you have something missing here, the top is going to affect that empty slot. So keep that in mind, because sometimes people will do like, oh, I want some turbulence, right? And then they're wondering, oh, why are my lines are going everywhere? Why is that happening? It's because your lines are going to go everywhere because your environment is empty down here. So you set it to regular, and now your lines are no longer getting affected by that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But generally, this is really good because now you're no longer restricted to just this tiny little aux panel. You can now make your trails a full particle system with all of the settings, exactly the same as the main layer. So you have full control over everything you want to do with your particle trails. You can all kinds of effects. And the other cool feature is the stroke from parent, which basically it's just drawing a line. So you're no longer going to get that breakup where you can see a bunch of little particles. It's a lot faster as well. So if you want to have just a solid line, I recommend using stroke from parent rather than emit. Because with emit, you'll be able to see those individual little particles. So now that we have the emit from parent, we can select a parent system. This basically chooses which layer we want the particles to come from. So if we do another one, emit from parent, we can choose, do we want these particles to be our emitter points, or do we want these particles to be our emitter points? Now, it's set to system 2, so it's just going to make a ball of particles everywhere. We probably don't want that, but very cool. You can just do as many layers as you want and set the emitters to emit from as many cascading effects as you want. Next, we have this feature, which is really cool. Emit on parent bounce basically just means if it hits something in the bounce simulator, if this particle hits something, it will emit from this source. And then emit from parent speed is exactly the same as that other one from the previous. It's just from speed. Apparent end of life is another cool one. It basically means it will explode out when you have a particle death. So you can see whenever the particles die, we're getting an emission on the second layer, and that basically creates fireworks or any other on death effect you could want. Very cool. And then I think that's it for the new features. You should be able to do everything you could in the previous version and more now that you understand this layer system. Just definitely get used to the layering system and how that works, because you can create entire backgrounds within just this layering system. It's really cool.